90 to 95% of the profit assessments I look at have operating expenses too high. And so the easy thing would be just go increase your prices so that all those percentages, the operating expense comes down where it needs to be and there's more room for profit and owner's pay. But if you just go out there and increase your prices willy-nilly without doing the work to identify the sweet spot, you're going to get a lot of pushback and your conversion rate on sales will go down.
You work hard in your business. On the Profit by Design podcast, we ask the big question. What has your business done for you lately? Hi, I'm Dr. Sabrina Starling. I'm the business psychologist, the author of the 4-Week Vacation and the How to Hire the Best series, as well as the founder of Tap the Potential, where we coach entrepreneurs like you to design sustainably profitable businesses that give you more time for what matters most and more money in your bank account than ever. Because after all, we believe work supports life, not the other way around. Weekly on the Profit by Design podcast, we bring you tips, tools, and strategies from our own experiences and from the experiences of our guests who are entrepreneurial thought leaders and real life entrepreneurs, all to support you in making intentionally profitable and sustainable business decisions to live the lifestyle you desire.
Hey there, welcome to the Profit by Design podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Sabrina Starling, and today we have a very exciting topic. This is pricing for predictable profit, right? You want to be able to predict your profit. You want to know how to price appropriately so that you can be profitable. So today in the podcast, I'm going to be covering how do you set prices? Can you afford to increase your prices? And what do you do if your margin is so low that you're not paying yourself appropriate owner's pay and there's not enough profit in the business? And today on the podcast, we're covering the more money in your bank account than ever with our topic. So I'm just really excited to get into this with you. And I want to also say that when it comes to setting prices, I would love to tell you there is an exact science to it. There's not an exact science. And the main thing that you need to consider is how do you price so that you can pay yourself an appropriate owner's pay and there be profit in the business. And you also need to consider that your business has to grow and you're going to have to invest for that growth to happen. So if you want to grow without debt, and we highly encourage that here at Tap the Potential, then you have to have enough margin built in for growth too. So you're not just breaking even and covering expenses. You also have to pay yourself appropriate owner's pay. And so let's just talk about a minute here. What goes into appropriate owner's pay? Because I have a lot of conversations with business owners who say, I'm paying myself about $75,000 a year. It'd be really nice if I could pay myself more, but I don't really need it. We've been getting by at this level for years and we make it work in our family. Well, are you purchasing health insurance? Are you purchasing adequate health insurance? Or are you having huge out-of-pocket expenses with your health insurance? Do you have life insurance? A lot of us business owners don't have life insurance. What about disability insurance? A lot of us forego that. A lot of us have no retirement plan other than sell the business and hope we get something for it at the point when we want to retire. And so when you work for a company as an employee, all of these things are benefits, but a lot of us business owners don't have this. And when you're thinking about your owner's pay and you've been making enough to get by, but you haven't thought about these portions of your owner's pay and what should be available, then it's time to think bigger about what you should be able to pay yourself. And I love the Tap the Potential solution because we build everything around designing your business to be sustainably profitable, meaning that you can pay yourself appropriate owner's pay so that you can have the benefits that go along with all of the entrepreneurial risk that you bear as you run your business. And so as we look at setting prices and you're thinking, okay, I need to have more owner's pay and my prices need to cover that. There's also the side of things where you need to have more profit, because profit helps you to have the money you need to invest to grow. So some of the profit needs to stay in the business so that you have a cash cushion. After COVID, a lot of our business owners were saying, I really want to make sure I have a year's worth of owner's pay and operating expenses in the vault so that we could survive anything. And a year's worth is wonderful, but let's start with 3 months of operating expenses and 3 months of owner's pay. And then let's move it to 6 months and get to where you really feel comfortable with that. And then you can decide if you want to go to a year. So you want to have a cash cushion in the business, but you also beyond, and that's like your emergency savings account that you would have in your household budget, but you also need to have your opportunities for investing for growth covered. So a lot of business owners we talk to at Tap the Potential, when they hear about the Better Business, Better Life program, and they're like, yes, I really need this, but oh my gosh, I can't pay for it. I have no idea. And that's because when we have been pricing, we have not been pricing for growth and considering that side of things. So when you're looking at growing, you need to be able to invest in yourself as a leader to grow your leadership. If you want to have A players on your team, you definitely need to be able to invest in yourself to attract those A players and learn what it takes to be a great place to work. But then once you have those A players on your team, they don't want to stay in entry-level positions. They want to grow, and you need them to grow because you need more leaders in your business. So you got to raise up the leaders in the business, and you've got to pay for training to raise up those leaders. And then you're going to grow to a level where you're going to need to bring in leaders from outside your company that bring in a higher level of expertise and become more like advisors to you on your leadership team. And so you need money for that. You also need money for space, for equipment, computer platforms, software, all the things. As you grow, those things add up. And we often don't plan on that. So I want to encourage you, if you're following the Tap the Potential solution and you're in our Better Business, Better Life program, you need to be planning on at least 30% growth year after year and making sure that you have enough profit being set aside to cover that growth. Let's talk about setting prices. So one of the areas when business owners come in and start working with us and their prices have been too low and we do a profit assessment on the business, we will see that they are barely covering operating expenses and cost of goods sold are very high. So one area where you can really impact your profitability is managing your cost of goods sold and staying on top of price increases. So if you're in construction, for example, you know that the cost of materials has gone up and up and up over the last few years. And if you're bidding on projects and say you're doing the bid and the work's not going to be completed and some of the materials may not be coming in more than or less than 9 months from now, so it could be up to 9 months or longer, and you don't know what's going to happen with those prices on those materials, that's an area where you could really lose profit and owner's pay because that's going to cut into your margin as those prices go up. So one of the things that you might do is consider working in your bids or your contracts that a clause that says if material costs increase more than X percentage, and maybe you decide 2% or 3%, then the materials costs will be adjusted in the final quote and when it's invoiced. And the customer is going to be responsible for that. So you're building that in, and that's for long-term projects. For projects that are shorter in scope, you need to look at what amount have your cost of goods sold gone up year over year, what percentage? And have you increased what you're charging? Are those costs coming through in the bids that you're doing? So always stay on top of your current cost of goods sold and make sure that you are including that in your pricing. Okay, so how do I determine prices? One of the things that I hear as we work with business owners, in most every business, there's more than one good or service being delivered. And one of the things that I will hear is business owners saying, well, we have different margins on different things that we're doing or different things that we're selling. And I want to encourage you that you need to have the same margin built in, no matter how much effort you're putting into it. So a common thing that I'll hear is, oh, you know what? We're just reselling this item. It's just a matter of us ordering it and putting it in the customer's hand and then billing it and collecting payment. So we only add a small margin to that. When you do that, what you're actually doing is you're intentionally deciding to neglect your cost of being in business, your building, your rent, your payroll, your profit, all the overhead that goes into this to make it possible for you to be in existence as a business, to order that item for that customer and put it in the customer's hands. It costs you to exist in business. And if you don't have the same margin across everything that you do, the items that you have or the services that you have where you have lower margin, that's actually going to eat into your profit in areas where you have bigger margin. So rule of thumb is your margin needs to be consistent across whatever you are selling. So this thing has this margin and this thing has this margin. No, you need consistent margin across everything that you're selling. So what we want to really look at, and I think I really thought through, like, what is the easiest way to teach this, especially on a podcast where many of you might be listening to this on audio. And so I think the easiest way to think about this is to look at net profit margin. So there's two typical margin ratios that we look at to look at business health. There's gross profit margin, and that gives a good overview of business health and profitability. But net margin is really designed to measure how much of your business's net income is generated from the revenue. And so what we want to pay attention to for our purposes in thinking about pricing is your net profit margin, not gross profit margin in this scenario. So I want to walk you through an example, and I picked simple numbers, so hopefully you can follow these calculations pretty easily. So let's say you have a business doing 1 million in total revenue, and you have cost of goods sold that is around 300,000. So the first calculation that you would do would be to determine your gross profit. And in profit first terms, we would call this real revenue. And we would also include the cost of subcontractors in here. So it's your cost of goods sold and your subcontractors. And we'll say that's 300,000 of the 1 million in revenue. So that leaves you with 700,000 in gross profit. And then to determine the gross profit margin, you divide gross profit by your revenue. So that's 700,000 divided by 1 million, and that gives you 0.7. And then you multiply that by 100 to determine your gross profit margin. So 0.7 times 100 is 70%, and that's your gross profit margin. So we want to consider not gross profit margin. We want to really look at your net profit margin, which is different than gross profit margin. And this formula is a little more complicated, but I promise it's easy enough. So we're working with the same company doing 1 million in revenue. Cost of goods sold is still 300,000. But you also have expenses of 500,000. So what that looks like is you take 1 million and you subtract the cost of goods sold and that 500,000 of operating expenses. So that's 300,000 cost of goods sold plus 500,000 for the operating expenses. So it's 800,000. So you're taking 1 million and you're subtracting that 800,000. That leaves you with 200,000 net profit on this 1 million revenue business. So the next calculation that you do is to divide your net profit by your total revenue. So $200,000 of net profit divided by 1 million leaves 0.20. And then the final step is to multiply that by 100 to calculate your net profit margin. So 0.20 times 100 gives you a 20% net profit margin. Now you may be thinking, hey, that sounds great. I'd be thrilled with a business that's doing a 20% net profit margin. What goes into that net profit, that 20% net profit? Well, what's in there is some of your owner's taxes that you're paying out of your pocket after you've paid yourself, when you pay your federal and state income taxes, and profit. And then all of a sudden, when we look at that 20%, we realize that 20% is not enough, right? Because we want to have more owners pay more profit. So what this means is this owner, even with a 20% net profit margin, is probably still not paying themselves enough as the owner. there will be very little profit in the business, and they're probably paying their federal and state income taxes out of their pocket after they've taken their pay from the business. And this also means that you have a business that has very little room for investing in growth. So it's still going to feel like there's a lot of struggle in this business. So when we use the Profit First target allocation percentages, you start to see that you need more than 20% net margin to be in good shape where you're paying yourself appropriately as the owner and there's sufficient profit. You're able to build cash reserves in the business for emergencies and still have money to invest in growing the business. And this is where what we do with our clients in our Better Business, Better Life program at Tap the Potential becomes so important, because it's not just a matter of willy-nilly increasing your prices, right? When you look at your business and you go, yes, I've done a quick profit estimate on my business and I can tell I don't pay myself enough owner's pay and there's not enough profit, so I should just go out and raise my prices. Well, no, because you're going to lose business, right? And that's the big fear. And that's why so many business owners don't raise prices every year. And you need to be in the habit of at least on an annual basis increasing your prices. And you may have to do it more frequently. During COVID, we saw a lot of people in the construction industry, like you had to raise your prices every 2 months just to keep up with the cost of goods sold. So you need to stay on top of that, but you can't just increase prices to get the margin you need to be able to pay yourself appropriately as the owner and have the profit in the business, because people will just balk and say, no, I'm not paying. That's a crazy amount. I'm not paying that. And that's the deepest fear that most of us have as we look at increasing prices. And so before we get into how do you price appropriately to hit your target allocation percentages for Profit First, I want to say that bottom line from what we've discussed so far is that you need to know your overhead. You need to know your basic operating expenses in your business. You need to know your cost of goods sold. And you need to be making sure that you are marking up these basic costs enough to cover your overhead and make a profit. And so at the very minimum, I recommend that you are looking at your profit and loss statements monthly and you're comparing month over month and you're watching and you're catching any major increases. And what I love to do, it is quick and dirty, but I have a trailing profit and loss statement, and it goes into the different categories like advertising, payroll, cost of goods sold, whatever other, telephone expenses, whatever. And I look at it from month to month and I look at where have we increased and where are we decreasing. I love to make the highlights of green where we're decreasing. That's always a good sign. But if I see a jump, I will highlight it and then I will go in and I will say, okay, what's causing that increase? Like this month at Tap the Potential, I took 2 of our team members, Caitlin and Carson, to Podcast Movement. So our operating expenses are higher for travel expenses and professional development. And I can look at that in the profit and loss statement and I can say, that's why that's higher. That's not going to stay that way. That was a 1-month increase. But if you look at, for example, if your payroll costs start going up month over month, that means, we need to pay attention here. And a lot of times, if you are in a trade or the construction industry and you see payroll costs going up, that means that you've got to control your payroll. And I'm going to get into that a little bit more in just a few minutes. But these are things that you need to be aware of because it's not just about pricing. You can't just adjust prices. You can't just say, payroll's going up, so we're going to increase our prices by this amount and we'll cover that and it'll all be good, because you'll lose business that way. So this is a fine dance between adjusting prices appropriately and driving efficiency throughout your business. So you have to do both hand in hand. And that's why I love the Tap the Potential solution, because at the end of the day, the Tap the Potential solution is about driving efficiency in your business so that you have more time, efficiency of time, and more time for what matters most, and more money in your bank account than ever. So you are reducing your costs and you're charging appropriately for the value that you're delivering. So let's look at this big question of, can I afford to increase my prices? That question is like, that's kind of at the heart of everything for us small business owners, is this fear of, if I increase my prices, will I lose business? So a quick and dirty way to know if you can afford to increase your prices is to look at, what is your conversion rate on the sales side of the business with qualified leads? So if your conversion rate is 50% or higher, that's really good. And it means you can afford, without changing anything in the business at this point, you can afford to increase your prices. And a good conversion rate to aim for is 35%. So if you hear more no's, it's not going to be a big deal. You're still going to be converting enough to be in business. And actually hearing more no's could serve you, because you're probably going to get rid of clients and customers that are much more price sensitive, who nickel and dime everything. And those also tend to be the customers who are harder for you to deal with and cost more for the business in the long term. So it's okay to get more no's from those individuals. If your conversion rate is 10%, you're not ready yet to increase your prices. You just can't do it. And the reason is that you're not conveying your value to your clients and customers. They're not buying in. And a lot of people are saying, hey, the conversations that you're having where you're trying to sell what you're offering, you have the majority of people, 90%, saying no to you. So that means you need to really dig in and clarify, well, what is my value? How am I unique and different? And all of this ties into step 2 of the Tap the Potential solution, which is niching down with that clearly defined sweet spot. So if your conversion rate is less than 35%, that means you really need to dig in and look at your sweet spot in the business, get that clarified, because that's what you're going to need to be able to increase your prices and communicate your unique value proposition, how you are different from the competition, and why someone would want to work with you. But the other piece that goes into clarifying your sweet spot is you're clarifying who are your ideal clients and customers and who is not an ideal client and customer. In one of our calls just this week, we had a client say, well, who would be ideal for you guys at Tap the Potential? And I was just able to say, these are the right people, these are the wrong people. And I gave some specific examples, and she was like, oh, I get it. Yeah, I will keep that in mind as I'm looking at referring to you. So you want to be able to talk about your business at that level of specificity, because when you know who your ideal clients and customers are, you're also tuning into what they value most about what you're doing for them. And when you're able to convey that, you are moving away from price pressure. And many business owners have this feeling of price pressure, which keeps you from increasing your prices, and you're not covering your costs. So year after year, you're actually paying yourself less as the business grows, because your cost of goods sold is going up and the cost of doing business is going up. So if your conversion rate is low, then it's a sign that you need to do some work on the sweet spot. It could also mean that you need to train your sales team members more effectively. But before I would look at training those sales team members, I would say, hey, we've got to look at the sweet spot first and make sure that that value is being articulated. And it goes beyond the sweet spot, because step 3 in the Tap the Potential solution is innovation. And when you start to make these micro innovations, and I talk about this a lot in our Better Business, Better Life Jumpstart. So if you have the opportunity in the next month or two, we've got a Jumpstart coming up in October. Head on over to tapthepotential.com/jumpstart and get registered for that, because I go in depth around how you innovate to drive value and be able to increase your prices. And the innovations don't have to be huge innovations. It's micro innovations over time that help you get better and better at what you're doing and the value that you're delivering to your top clients and customers. So you're really tuning into, what are your top clients wishing you would do for them? And you're doing those things. And it's not huge things, but every time you do one of those things and you create a system around it, which is, by the way, that's a $10,000 an hour activity, you are adding more and more value, and it will help you increase your prices so that you can pay yourself appropriately and have the margin that you need for profit, cash reserves building up in the business, and the opportunity to invest for growth in the business. So if your profit margin is too low and you are not able to fully increase your prices, I want you to understand that it's not just about increasing prices to get the margin where you need it. And it's not just about cutting expenses. It really is the culmination of doing both simultaneously. And there is not a science. There's not like a specific formula that I can give you. But what I can say is it's the culmination of the small steps forward taken consistently over a period of time that lead to big change in a relatively short period of time. And I want to share an example with you with one of our clients that we worked with several years ago, Kathy and Essie, at the Lighthouse Wellness Center. When she started with us, she'd been in business for 10 years and she was just struggling. Everything was a struggle and she was just hanging in by a thread. And when she came in to tap the potential in our Better Business, Better Life program, it was right after COVID happened. So she'd already been hanging by a thread, but then COVID happened. They were a therapy business. They saw their clients in person. So they had to pivot rapidly overnight from in-person work with clients to going virtual. And the business was already struggling financially. So when Kathy came in, she was at a 7% net profit margin. And that was just way too low. She wasn't able to pay herself enough. There wasn't much profit in the business in that, and then you're dealing with COVID on top of that. So she almost tripled that in 10 months with working with us. So she went from 7% to 20%. Now, 20% is good, but it's not great because there's still more owner's pay to be captured and there's still more profit to be captured. But what I'm getting at with this example is this is a realistic example of what this really looks like, that you've come in and we start looking at, well, what does your profit assessment say about where your operating expenses are and your owner's pay and your profit in relation to the revenue that you're collecting? And where are the opportunities for adjustment? 90 to 95% of the profit assessments I look at have operating expenses too high. And so the easy thing would be just go increase your prices so that all those percentages, the operating expense comes down where it needs to be and there's more room for profit and owner's pay. But if you just go out there and increase your prices willy-nilly without doing the work to identify the sweet spot, you're going to get a lot of pushback and your conversion rate on sales will go down. And if it goes down below 35%, then you're going to be struggling again. And so what Kathy realized in working with us is that just getting to that 20% in 10 months was amazing. And she was thrilled with that. And she said, and that is just the beginning. She was starting to see like, oh my gosh, I can do these things and I can invest in my team and we can create more efficiency over here on this part of the business. And that's what allows that consistent, predictable profit. And so one of the things that I think is so beneficial with having us as your trusted advisors on board with you when you're in our Better Business, Better Life program is we are reviewing your profit assessment and your percentages every quarter, and we're making adjustments with you. So when you first come in, we're going to do that profit assessment. And then immediately after that, we're going to do an expense review, and we're going to help you look at anything you can cut to get those expenses down. But that's only the first round with us, because then we go into clarifying your sweet spot. And once your sweet spot is clarified, then we can go back in and look at your expenses again. And we will be able to identify places where you have expenses that have nothing to do with the sweet spot of your business. And one of the first places we look is payroll, because payroll is one of your biggest expenses. And a lot of times what we will see is before you've identified the sweet spot of the business, you have hired people because you got really busy. You were saying yes to a lot of things. And so you hired people to do work for less desirable customers and probably to do work on less desirable projects. And so then you hire and you add to your payroll. Payroll is your biggest expense. And those team members are serving those less desirable clients. So the kind of the typical thing that we will see is when business owners come in, they have a team that's a mix of A players, B players, and warm bodies. And you hang on to those warm bodies because you think, well, I need somebody to do some of the work to get things done because I don't want to overburden my A players and myself with the work. But what clearly starts to unfold is as you identify the sweet spot of the business, you realize you don't need those C, D, and F players, those warm bodies, because you're going to have fewer clients, but you're doing better work for them. So the margins are better on that work. And you can run the business with fewer team members, and that has a significant impact on your profitability because you're really getting your payroll down. But it's also really nice because in terms of your ability to attract A players to your business, you need to be able to pay competitive wages and salaries, and you can offer higher wages and salaries to those A players when there's more efficiency in the business. So it's kind of that magical mix. And we've got the reason I said it's really nice to work with us because we adjust from quarter to quarter with you what your allocation percentages are for owner's pay, tax, and profit and operating expenses. And we guide you through that process. And we're really there looking at with you at how much of the Tap the Potential solution have you implemented, how much variance can your business tolerate? So can it tolerate paying you a few more percentage points for owner's pay and profit? Have you reduced operating expenses? Are you charging more where you're creating that margin? And we move that over, at least 6 quarters. Sometimes it takes longer depending on, how severe when someone comes in. If you have operating expenses that are like 80%, sometimes it's going to take more than 6 quarters to get you to those target allocation percentage for profit and owner's pay. But the nice thing is you have us, and we have a lot of experience in doing this. You have us guiding you through that process, and you're not trying to figure it out on your own. And when it comes to increasing prices, I love how this unfolds in our Better Business, Better Life program and the conversations that happen, because usually a business owner will sheepishly put out to the other group members, I need to raise my prices and I'm feeling really nervous and I don't know how people are going to react. And somebody in the group will ask, well, when was the last time you raised prices? And the business owner might say, well, it was like almost 2 years ago now. And then all the other business owners are going to say, you know what? It's time to raise your prices. And what happens as that conversation unfolds is your confidence in raising your prices and the value that you're delivering to your clients and customers goes up, which if you have team members who are selling for you, your confidence is very important because they need your confidence in order for them to be confident in what they're selling. So we see that confidence start to come up, and then you're going to make a commitment in the group that you're going to work through your price increases over the next 2 weeks and then come back to group and share the price increase plan, how you're rolling it out. And so there's that accountability. And when you roll out the price increase and you get pushback from clients or customers, we're there with you to talk you through that pushback and help you figure out, well, how much of this pushback do I really need to pay attention to? Because they might be right. And how much of the pushback is coming from clients and customers that you didn't want to do business with in the first place? They are people who actually suck the profit away from your business. So those are all areas where, as you're working through your pricing, it becomes so valuable to have the support of other business owners in a small group and the Tap the Potential team guiding you through those price increases. So the other comment that I want to make around managing expenses, and especially because a lot of our clients at Tap the Potential are in the construction industry, is it becomes very important to manage overtime, scope creep, and change orders. So overtime usually comes in when you are not able to get the work done in the time that you predicted it was going to take to get done when you bid the project. And I will say that the majority, this kind of gets to our human nature. As human beings, we are notorious for underestimating how long it will take us to complete something. And so I would encourage you to start tracking how long it actually takes you to complete projects, and when there's time where your team is working overtime to complete projects. And when you start tracking that, you can start working to reduce the frequency of that happening, and it'll help you become more and more accurate when you're bidding, and you'll become more aware. But the other thing that's really nice about having a sweet spot in your business and a niche where you're doing consistent work from customer to customer is it becomes easier for you to predict how long these projects are going to take and how many man hours go into those projects. So you'll get more accurate that way too. But managing your overtime and keeping that to a minimum really helps you manage your payroll expenses. The other side of this this is scope creep and not managing change orders and utilizing change orders appropriately. You need to have clear boundaries around this for yourself about what constitutes scope creep. And again, this is where it's really helpful to have other business owners to bounce this around with in a small group setting, because you will start to recognize, what you say to yourself when there's a change and there's going to be some scope creep on the project. You'll say, it's not that big a deal. We can absorb it. But it's the cumulative effect of that statement over time that really sucks away your profit and your owner's pay. And so we can help hold you accountable, and we can help you be just more stringent in following when change orders need to be put in place and charging appropriately for the increase in work and labor that's going into a project. So those are some key ways for managing your operating expenses. The other thing that I want to say about managing your cost of goods sold expenses is the better you get at having a clearly defined sweet spot and a niche that you're serving, you have more and more leverage to negotiate with vendors when you're purchasing materials, because you're going to be purchasing from the same vendors more frequently, and you're probably going to be increasing the amount per order that you're purchasing from them, because you're going to work with higher level clients and customers as you really niche down with that clearly defined sweet spot. So you're going to become a better customer or client to those vendors, which gives you more room to negotiate, but you also have room to negotiate terms. And a really fun example that we had on the Tap the Potential team a few years ago is we had a client of ours send a team member through Leadership Bootcamp, which is what we offer for the A players on our client's team to help those A players start to think like business owners and think about profitability in the business and the sweet spot. And this team member was an A player. He came through Leadership Bootcamp, and he started to really pay attention to what could he do in his role to improve the profitability of the company overall. And what he recognized is no one had negotiated terms with vendors in quite some time. So he just took it upon himself to do that. He talked to the owner, but he said, this is what I'm going to do. And the owner said, yes, that'd be great if you would do that. I've been meaning to do it. I just haven't had time to get around to doing it. So he did that. And immediately, like within 2 weeks' time, their cost of goods sold went down significantly. And what happens when cost of goods sold goes down? Well, that money can come now into owner's pay and profit, and it creates opportunities for the team to benefit as well, because now there's opportunities for raises to happen. So this is a fine dance. And what we specialize in at Tap the Potential is really helping you navigate through this dance to get to predictable profit in your business. And that brings us all the way back as we conclude today to step one in the Tap the Potential solution, where you are designing your business to be sustainably profitable, because we're going to help you get your profit and owner's pay and tax and operating percentages established. And then every 2 weeks, you are going to make consistent, predictable contributions to those accounts, and you will see your owner's pay and profit go up, and you will see that opportunity to invest in growth for your team and yourself and the business overall. That starts to become more and more possible. So this is all about the small steps forward, but they have to be taken in a consistent direction. And that consistent direction that we're taking you in is designing that business to be sustainably profitable so that you have more time for what matters most and more money in your bank account than ever. And the beauty of this is it doesn't just benefit you, it benefits your team. Because when team members work in a business where the profit is barely there, they have no job security and they have no opportunity for raises. And so this is not just about, hey, it makes your life better, because believe me, it totally makes your life better, but it also raises the quality of life for your team, because you will have the opportunity to give them opportunities for advancement. You'll have the opportunity to give them raises and benefits. And so what's beautiful about the Tap the Potential solution is we don't just teach this to you, the business owner. We invite your team members into our Leadership Bootcamp, and they learn about it. So it becomes an effort where everyone is looking out for the profitability of the business, because everyone in the business sees why that is important and why they want to manage the business's profitability. And sometimes your team members are the best ones to tell you where to cut expenses, because they're on the front lines and they see waste happening. And so that's another area where your team members can come in and say, hey, this was an unnecessary expense. I saw this happen. How can we put a system in place so this doesn't happen again? So it's not about finger pointing and blaming people. It's okay, what can be tightened up? And when you have all of your team members supporting and thinking in that way, you have more and more efficiency happening in the business. So again, it's that accumulation of the small steps. So as we wrap up today, we have covered how do you increase prices? How do you set your prices? How do you know you need to increase prices? We've talked about what to do when your net profit margin is too low, and you don't have enough that you can pay yourself appropriate owner's pay and profit. We dug deep into all the different variables that impact that and that can be changed. And what I love so much is you don't have to make a huge sweeping change in one area of the business. Let's look at all these micro adjustments that are going into this one direction, which is a more efficient business that creates a better quality of life for all involved. Those are all the small changes we're making, and we're making them in multiple areas of the business. And they add up in a very short period of time. 12 months, 2 years, your business can be very different. So if you want our help with this, if you need our help in getting your pricing where it needs to be, in having appropriate margins for your owner's pay and profit, identifying your sweet spot, any of those things that I've touched on today, and if it feels like, oh my gosh, I know I need to do this, but I don't know where to start, or if I do know where to start, I don't know where to go next, you need to book a call with us. Just go to tapthepotential.com, click on the book a call, and you'll get to meet with a member of our success team who will ask you all kinds of questions about where you are in the business, where you're struggling. We have our Better Business, Better Life assessment that we'll ask you to take, and we'll be able to really pinpoint with you, this is what's needed right here. This is what's going to make the impact. And they'll either, if you're a good fit for what we do in the Better Business, Better Life program, they'll invite you in, or they'll share resources with you that will help you on your journey. Because at the end of the day, what we're all about at Tap the Potential is making sure you're able to take your life back from your business. So I really appreciate you tuning in here with me today. Make sure you are subscribed to our podcast on whatever platform you're listening on, so you don't miss the upcoming episodes. So I want to tell you what's coming up next week. I had the opportunity when I was at one of the conferences I attended recently. I ran into Nate Woodbury, and Nate shared with me this really cool strategy that he has for driving business through YouTube. And so if you have any curiosity about how to use YouTube more effectively in your marketing to attract your ideal clients, you're going to want to listen to next week's episode. You can subscribe on the podcast platform you listen to. Thanks for being here with me today, and join us next week. Bye for now. Thank you for spending time with me today. Join me in our Tap the Potential Mighty Networks community at tapthepotential.com/group. Share your aha moments from today's episode, ask me questions, and join in on the fun with your fellow entrepreneurs on the journey to designing sustainably profitable businesses that give you more time for what matters most and more money in your bank account than ever. Isn't it time you take your life back? And finally, share today's episode with a friend if you know a friend who would enjoy it. This is real life business. Keep your chin up, keep moving forward. You got this.